All right, we're continuing on with auto rotations. I think we're on part 9 here. I'd like to talk to you about the difference between a forced landing and a precautionary landing. A forced landing is just that. You're forced to make a landing because your engine quit, you ran out of fuel, whatever, and you're forced into the decision of actually having to put the thing onto the ground. A precautionary landing, on the other hand, is just that. You're making a landing, and you would make a precautionary landing if you've got a developing problem, but the aircraft's still flying. You're still able to get you from here to the place hopefully that you're going. There'd be such things as weather deteriorating, getting low on fuel or lower than you think you are or whatever, or you're developing an engine problem. You'd be much better off to make a precautionary landing and sort out the problem on the ground. Most problems are best sorted out on the ground, not in the air. Okay. So I'll give you an example of that. I was actually delivering it was actually a gyroplane. Doesn't matter if it's a helicopter or a gyroplane. When the engine quits, it's the same thing. You know, the helicopter, I got to get the collective down. The gyroplane's always in an auto rotation anyway, but once it quits, all the decision points are the same. All right, you're going to do a forced landing, and essentially it's all the same in a gyroplane as it is in a helicopter. Okay, so I'm flying a gyroplane out to North Carolina to deliver it. About 2/3 of the way out there, I'm over a heavily wooded area. In fact, it was so wooded that I thought it would be neat to do a video of it. So I actually took my phone, and I literally went from the left side all the way around, panned to the right, and there was nothing but trees. There's literally no place to make a forced landing that wouldn't have been into the trees. So I sent that video to my wife, and someone would comment on there like, well, there's no place to go, hope the engine doesn't quit or whatever. So after I sent the video, I got to kind of thinking about it. I thought, man, I better kind of take some of my own advice here and go ahead and climb up. So as I came in on the throttle and advanced the throttle, the engine started running ridiculously rough. I had a heck of a power loss. I thought, well, spooling the engine up didn't agree with me, so I backed off on the throttle. And when I got back down to about 31 inches of manifold pressure, the engine actually smoothed out. And we're back to flying again, you know, without an altitude loss. So at that point, I started a climb. Most efficient airspeed for a climb in the gyro is 65. So I set it on 65, and I'm making a couple 300 foot a minute, maybe 200-300 foot a minute or so. And then on my GPS, all the GPSs have a nearest button on them now. And you just press the nearest button, and it tells you where the nearest airport was. I really didn't care what airport it was. I just wanted to go to the quickest one I could get to. So I pressed nearest button and turned towards the airport, and continued to climb. Again, if you double your altitude, you actually quadruple your options on how far that you can actually go in an auto rotation. So climbing, altitude is definitely your friend. Sometimes in an auto rotation, you want to try to establish a climb. You give yourself some more options in case the thing does quit. You'll be able to more likely be able to get to some place that's favorable. So I continued on to the airport. When I arrived at the airport, I was actually, 2,000 or 3,000 feet in the air. And so I basically just got close to the airport and basically did a spiral down kept within landing distance, so I know that I could make the runway no matter what before I ever backed off on the power. So when I came out of the power, the engine continued running, and I was able to actually spiral down to the runway and land. It only took me a matter of a few minutes to fix it, and what had happened was the 914 is a turbocharged engine, and sometimes the carburetor bowls, if they're 5 or 6 years old and the carburetors, if somebody doesn't fly it very much and the carburetors don't get rebuilt, then the gaskets tend to degrade a bit, and even though the bowl is on there and it's torqued down to a certain torque setting with a piece of safety wire, I think the gasket must degrade and they'll start to actually leak under high boost. And that's exactly what was happening. So it took me just a short period of time to actually retorque the bowls, rewire the safety wire on it, and I was on my way again. But again, a precautionary landing is the way to go. If I would have left the throttle all the way in on the thing, I would have settled eventually to the ground and been into a forced landing. All right? So precautionary landing is the way to go sometimes. Okay, so let's talk about the engine has now quit, or you've got such a significant power loss that you're forced to make a forced landing. Let's talk about site selection. You're going to do an auto rotation. Well, there's a publication, and it's a U.S. Army publication, and this is not a joke, and the title of the publication is How to Crash a Helicopter. Here's a copy of it, How to Crash a Helicopter. And this is very good reading. If you're going to be a helicopter pilot, everybody that's a helicopter pilot needs to read this publication, because it gives a lot of recommendations on site selection. If you're forced into doing the auto rotation, where are you going to go? Let's say that you've entered an auto rotation and you've got trees under you, but there's a field off in the distance and it's a little bit too far away. If you were trying to make that field because, oh, it looks better, I can do an auto rotation into an open field, but if you were to get the nose down and get your speed way up and end up even trying to pull a little collective to stretch it out, and you end up getting a blade stall, not making it to the field and getting a blade stall, that's a fatal event. So you don't really want to do that. All right, settling into the trees would be your best option in that way. And kind of interestingly enough, the Army's done a lot of looked at a lot of crashes and a lot of settling into trees, and it's almost never a fatal event. Some people get injured, but most everybody pretty much walks away with minor injuries if you settle the helicopter into the trees. All right. So how would you want to do that? Believe it or not, you actually do an auto rotation, basically to the top of the tree canopy, and what you're going to try to do is flare, and somewhat like the auto rotations where we drop one down into a muddy field, you try to reflare it to quite a high position on the nose to bleed off as much forward speed as possible and settle into the trees with hopefully near zero airspeed and in a tail low position. And you're using your tail and the bottom of the belly of the aircraft as a crush zone. And you want to go in that way, not and have a tree come up through the plexiglass on you there. So, and kind of remarkably enough, I never really thought about this, but you want to go for the bushiest trees. You don't want to go for the little skinny trees. All right, the trees are actually you're using the trees as energy absorbers. All right. So the little skinny trees don't absorb much energy, and they're more of an obstacle than an energy absorber. So you want to go for the bushy areas of the trees. You try to get the lowest trees you can that are quite bushy and settle into those. All right, what's some other options? How about if we're going across a lake and the engine quits and we've got to do a auto rotation into the lake? Well, it's sort of similar. You're going to, the engine's quit, we establish our auto rotation. Again, we're going to flare on our auto rotation quite high to bleed off as much speed as we can, and then try to get the skids down below us and settle vertically into the water. Once you hit the water, and in American helicopters, you want to roll left. And the ones that the blades turn to the left, roll left. If the blades turn to the right, as a European helicopter, you want to roll it to the right. And the main reason is when you roll the helicopter, blades are turning this way. As the blade impacts the water, all that would do is tend to push the tail down into the water. If you went the other way with it and the blades hit on the right side, it could actually flip their aircraft 180 degrees, which is quite disorienting, and you run the risk of hitting your head and get knocked out or whatever. So if you're going to auto rotate to a slope, you want to auto rotate up the slope. You don't want to go down the slope for obvious reasons, right? So, and there's some other good pieces of advice. I'm not going to give you all of them, but this is very easy to find. Just do a search for how to crash a helicopter, print it out, and read the whole thing.